All right, welcome to the Fight Block. This is episode number 3. My name is Jeremy. I'm here once again with Coop, my fellow MMA enthusiast. You know what? Not a whole lot going on in the MMA world this week.
Pretty slow news week overall.
Yeah, but nonetheless, we got our topics. We got some interesting stuff to talk about. But first off, next week's episode, looking forward to it. Our first official prediction show. UFC 152, John Jones defending the light heavyweight championship against Vitor Belfort.
Looking forward to it. Always like getting into the analytics, and even if it wasn't the match we were going to see, I think it's still going to be an exciting night of fights.
Oh, yeah. And then also on the card was originally the main event. First ever flyweight championship in the UFC. Joseph Benavidez takes on Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. That one should be a good one.
Yep. History will be made, and it should be a good fight to boot. And to round out the significant fights on that card, you also have Michael Bisping taking on Brian Stann in what should be a barn burner. And
Brian Stann will come up again in our episode, as you will see. But yeah, so next week, stay tuned. First official prediction show. To get things kicked off, as always, if there are comments, we're going to go on to Word on the Block. Not many people stopped by to say anything about our video this week, but that's all right. We got some decent views, but yeah. So just giving a quick shout out to I'm not quite sure how you pronounce this guy's username, but XCreboX. He just wanted to stop by and say, "Sup?
What's up, back? Thank you for stopping by."
All right, and that's about it. So what's on the agenda for today's show? We're gonna start off. Kind of an interesting story. Renzo Gracie takes down 2 robbers, attempted mugging, and while he was doing it, he was live tweeting during the whole incident.
Crazy stuff.
And so we're going to give a little recap on Renzo and what we think about his whole incident, a little bit of controversy surrounding it. But talk about Renzo, and that's going to lead us on to, we're going to give a list of top 5 badass MMA fighter moments outside the cage.
Outside of the cage, all having to do with using their techniques for self-defense and, generally for the greater good.
For the greater good, exactly what I was thinking. So I'm looking forward to that. We also got a little honorable mention in that list, too, that I'm looking forward to talking about. And then, like we said, it's a slow week in MMA, so we're going to talk a little bit about Brock Lesnar and whether or not he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. That was kind of going around.
One that keeps MMA fans up at night.
Yeah, that was kind of the talk of the week. Thanks to Paul Heyman, good friend and MMA enthusiast, also
smart
supporter.
Guy.
But felt Brock Lesnar deserved to be in the Hall of Fame, and sparked a little bit of talk. So we'll give our thoughts on Brock Lesnar, whether we think he should be in the Hall of Fame. Other than that, I think it might be a little bit more of a shorter show this week. Like I said, not a whole lot else going on.
Yeah. This week's going to be high on sort of extra non-news content, which is just as rewarding and actually kind of allows us to go into further depth than just reporting what everybody else is, too.
Yeah. So, I guess we'll get started with Renzo Gracie. This was a recent news story. He's come out and told the story completely himself because, like I said, he was live tweeting during the whole incident. But Renzo Gracie, a couple days ago, was walking back to his car that night, and he noticed that 2 guys were following him. And I'm going to make this kind of brief, but said that the 2 guys approached him, and he kind of took notice that they were following and got that sense, and was tweeting about it and everything. And actually, direct quote, this is one of his tweets. Renzo had to say, quote, 22nd Street and 10th Avenue right now. 2 guys following me. Can't help but have a big smile upon my face. I'm talking about a happy one. Smiley face. Smile, 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 smile. I think he was kind of looking forward to what was about to happen.
Yeah, coming out of retirement in a different kind of way.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so the 2 guys approached him. One of them asked him for a cigarette. Renzo told him that he didn't smoke. Tweeted that also. And apparently, according to Renzo, one of the guys reached into his pocket demanding he give Renzo a cigarette, and it was the pocket in which his wallet just so happened to be in. So, in self-defense, Renzo knocked one of the guys down with a combo punch and sent the other guy running. And Renzo got in his car, decided to try and track down this other guy, drove around for a little bit, eventually spotted the guy, pulled over his car, approached the guy from behind without him seeing, slapped on a chokehold. I should say, put on a chokehold, he said 3 times to be exact. Choked the guy out, let him wake up, choked the guy out again, wake up, choked the guy out again. And then for good measure, he gave the guy what he said the Brazilians like to call a raccoon. And that was a punch to each eye so that the guy would wake up with double black eyes. But
just to add insult to injury.
Exactly. But to close it all off, Renzo posted a picture of his hand as proof, swollen, cut up, and but you know, there's a little bit of controversy because some guys are giving him praise for defending himself, making a statement, teaching these guys a lesson, but others are saying that they didn't physically and violently provoke him, they didn't approach him, they didn't attack him, they were reaching for his wallet, but each of Renzo's texts were insinuating that he wanted this to happen. He wanted to, and he goes back and says, he hasn't done this kind of thing since he was in high school or back in Brazil. Like, he enjoyed putting a beating and giving these guys a lesson. But yeah, it's a little bit controversial because he was live tweeting everything, and technically, some people are saying if these two guys chose to press charges, Renzo pretty much posted all his evidence on Twitter, stating, the pleasure he got from it and how he may have possibly taken things a little bit too far.
Yeah, I think that, obviously Renzo was okay after the very first part of the incident in which he knocked out one of the guys and had the other one running. It could have just ended there, but at the end of the day, it's kind of one of those universal laws or lessons in karma that if you're going to rob from somebody, you kind of have to expect the worst if the tables get turned on you. That isn't to say that some scumbag lawyer can argue it the other way. I believe there's a case in which a burglar fell through the roof of someone's house, landed on a knife, and then ended up suing that person, and they actually won.
I believe it.
Yeah, it is America.
Yeah. But yeah, so we'll see what the fallout is. I think he might have taken things a little too far. Definitely taught the guy a lesson, but just his demeanor about the whole situation, and he could have easily let things go after the one guy ran away. Obviously, didn't want anything to do with Renzo, but Renzo further continued the incident by tracking this guy down and choking him out. Then, like you said, add insult to injury, gave the guy a raccoon.
Yeah,
possibly could be considered unnecessary.
I think it was necessary, but yeah, I do see what people are saying about that. He didn't have to at the end of the day. I just think karma-wise, it was necessary, but I guess physical violence-wise wasn't necessary.
I would have to agree with you there, too.
But also, how's that for an anti-bullying and anti-smoking campaign? Just all wrapped into one. Those would get my attention. Just the Renzo tweets more than those stupid Above the Influence commercials.
Oh, yeah. One thing about mixed martial arts and, the ever-evolving and growing sport is, more and more people are actively partaking in, mixed martial arts training, working towards different forms of the martial arts and getting their belts. And you never really know who on the streets may just be a black belt in, jiu-jitsu or a black belt in, taekwondo.
As Steve Edward would say.
Exactly.
Actually, on Adam Carolla's show, he had Mayhem Miller on there and discussed that very topic. And he was like, if I looked at you, you look like the wiry guy with special needs at the bar that I'm going to pick on. And guys like you are the reason I can't do that anymore, because you never know who's just a black belt in jiu-jitsu and who's an MMA fighter.
Exactly.
Like, you never know who you can and can't pick on anymore.
Exactly. You see guys like Kimbo Slice in the bar, okay, I'm going to stay away from that guy. He looks like a badass. But you got these flyweight guys now, where I'm guarantee you mess with Joseph Benavidez or Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, and you don't really have any fighting skills. Those guys are going to whoop your ass.
Yeah, lesson learned at the end of the day. Better to approach the guys who look like Kimbo than the guys with the pink hair like Seth Petrozelli.
Yes, exactly. Well said. But yeah. So never know who's out there, and you never know who you shouldn't mess with these days, especially with the growth of the sport. That's one thing that's becoming more popular. So yeah, I side with lesson learned. Renzo Gracie once again continuing his martial art legacy in different ways, but we'll see what the fallout is, because there could be some consequences, but for the most part, interesting story, and just showing how mixed martial artists today can not only use their skills in the cage and whatnot, but also can use them for greater good, like you said.
Yeah, it transcends just the sport to self-defense as well, and I think that's why you see a lot of women getting into different mixed martial arts, even some that don't have a real actual sporting event, if you will, like Krav Maga. It's still martial art technically, but you just see more people getting into it in general, because it enables people of all shapes and sizes to be able to defend themselves, even if they never plan on stepping in the ring or octagon themselves. I mean, theoretically, you could do a whole show about how people non-sport uses for it, whether it's losing weight or getting in shape and self-defense and good karma and all these other kinds of things.
Oh, for sure. For sure. So, in closing, Renzo solidifies his name in the ranks among MMA badasses outside the octagon, outside the cage, the ring.
Definitely.
Which leads us on to our list of top 5 moments for other fighters, just showing off their badassness outside the cage, and for the most part, for the greater good. And we're going to start off with number 5. Matt, I'll let you do the honors. Who's first on our list?
So first on the on the list of fighters who've dished out their lessons in street MMA to some people would be Anthony Hardonk. Anthony Hardonk, heavyweight, who you may remember is now retired after his fight with Pat Barry.
Good fight.
He was a fixture of the heavyweight division for years, one of those gatekeepers that always had good fights, but never quite broke into the upper echelon of talent. But Hardonk actually was involved in a little bit of an altercation that almost saw him as the victim, just like Renzo, when 2 gentlemen just outside of the LA International Airport approached him and ironically asked him if he had money so they could buy cigarettes, which is eerily reminiscent of Renzo's. Perhaps it was the same gentleman who didn't learn their lesson?
Maybe. You never know.
So Hardonk, being the nice guy that he is, of course, took out his wallet. Unfortunately, he did not have any money in there, which angered the men, and they insisted that they were going to take it anyways to get his credit cards. Furthermore, Hardonk, being the badass that he is, at 6'4" and 250 pounds, he was one of the UFC's largest heavyweights. And, he said, well, I'm not doing that. Basically, come take it, over my dead body.
Yeah, quote, "What, are you crazy? I'm not giving you my wallet," end quote. Anthony Hardonk, as we told the guys.
At which point the 2 men threatened the seriousness of their request and also threatened violence. Hardonk continued to remain calm, as he has in the past worked as a bouncer and security guard, so he's used to dealing with douchebags, in other words. And after him kind of maintaining his position, the 2 men kind of decided against it and promptly left. Shortly thereafter, Anthony Hardonk, and I believe it was his his attorney, they were actually traveling and they saw the 3 men actually approach a woman, and they were going to do the same thing to her, and then they turned their attention to a man nearby, basically wrestled the guy to the ground and took his wallet. His attorney, Hardonk's attorney, decided to call the police, as most people would have done, but it wasn't good enough for Hardonk. He couldn't just sit idly by as an innocent civilian had his pride beat down a little bit because he was wrestled to the ground, but then also his funds stolen. And then Hardonk proceeded to chase the men down, knocked 2 of them on their ass, and then chased the 3rd one until he dropped the wallet. And then he grabbed the wallet, and the 3 men got away. And that was basically it. Hardonk, in retrospect, says, maybe they would have tried to hurt him or try to stab him or, shoot him or something. He didn't really know, but his act of courage worked out for the better.
Yeah. Apparently, the 2 guys that originally approached Hardonk, he said were, somewhere around 18 and 20. They're younger guys, and Hardonk wouldn't be one of those kind of guys I'd see on the street and be like, hey, I want to rob that guy. He's a big dude.
Talk about poor choices in people to rob.
He's a heavyweight. That's another, you got a big guy, and he knows how to kickbox like a badass.
Yeah. And even if they don't know the kickboxing background, of all the people, all the old women who would barely notice if you slipped their purse off their arm in the Worlds, you would pick the guy who's 6'4", 250 pounds and engage him in a conversation before you decide to rob his wallet.
Stupid. All right, so Anthony Hardonk, number 5 on our list of MMA badasses outside the cage. Moving on to number 4, Jon Jones. In the news recently, we've spoken about him, but once a MMA hero outside the cage. This was back in 2011, prior to his big title fight with Anthony Hardonk, with Shogun Rua for the light heavyweight championship. He was on his way with Greg Jackson to either a waterfall or some sort of park to do a little bit of meditation before his big fight, when they stumbled across a robber who was attempting to steal a woman's purse. So Jon Jones and Greg Jackson said, and they decided to chase after this guy. And apparently they chased him up this hill where Jon Jones leg sweeped the guy, took him down. Greg Jackson caught up. They were able to hold the guy down. And until, authorities came, they got a picture of the guy and posted it on Twitter. And, but what makes the story special is, after doing all this heroic stuff, Jon Jones walked into the cage that night, just absolutely destroyed Shogun, and became the new light heavyweight champion. So all in a day's work, you stop a robbery, and you win a UFC championship.
Yeah, he's amongst company of guys that are willing to do that on the street for sure and have done it, and he's certainly amongst men who are willing to step in the octagon. But to do both in the same night, I think that was the reason that a lot of people like Jon Jones. I know we had a show already where we talked about why people don't like him, but I think that's one of the redeeming qualities that shows that at his core, Jon Jones is a good guy.
Yeah. As much as you dislike his decision to back out of UFC 151 and, his growing cockiness, as some would say, deep down, Jon Jones, he's not a bad guy.
No, he's selfish and annoying, and that may pass too. It may be a phase. A lot of people kind of went through the same thing with, Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, or to use an MMA example, one who Jon Jones fought before, Rashad Evans. And if you notice in their kind of beef when they were building up to it, Rashad would always say, Jon, the funniest thing about you is that, you think you have it figured out, but I was in your shoes, and, you're going to realize that there is no one. There is no one greatest. There's always somebody training, coming up, who's going to beat you. It may take one fight, it may take 10 years, but there is always someone who's going to beat you. You're never going to actually be the one and only. And he was just kind of highlighting the fact that, Rashad kind of called himself out, threw himself under the bus, and was like, I was that cocky showboater. I still am confident and kind of cocky, but, I understand and I'm humbled now as well. And so I think you may see that evolution in Jon Jones, which is, what I'm, and I think all the fans are hoping for.
Oh, yeah. He's young, which, that's huge. He's got all that going for him, but he's got a lot of growing still to do. That's for sure. So, Jon Jones, number 4 on our list of MMA badasses outside the cage. Moving on to number 3. Cooper, let you give the little recap. This one's actually pretty interesting because it was all caught on video. But at number 3, we got
this is actually
lightweight Roger Huerta.
Yeah, we got TMZ is the main source reporting it.
I believe so. Someone caught a video on their phone
of actually a college football player. I forgot what position or the name, but he wasn't famous, so it doesn't really matter. Actually,
A big guy.
big guy, huge guy. He played. He definitely wasn't a kicker or a wide receiver. Let's put it that way. He wasn't. I think he was a linebacker.
Yeah.
Something like that. Anyways, he was well north of 200 pounds. I think close to 225, 230. And he was, he was a big boy, explosive, D1 athlete. And it showed him actually delivering a punch to a probably somewhere between 110 to 130 pound woman outside of a nightclub, presumably because the woman just didn't want to give him the time of day and was, in his own words, being rude to him. So, not only did a whole bunch of people witness this event that could have potentially turned into an arrest or something like that, but little 155 pound, although it was off season, so he's probably like 170 pound, lightweight Roger El Matador Huerta decided to fight a bull of his own that night. Took it into his own hands, confronted the guy, asked, "What the hell were you doing?" That was a girl. I think you can even make that out on the tape. The two proceed to kind of exchange a little more words. Gentleman takes off his shirt. Roger Huerta then kind of gets the best of him, knocks him to the ground, and then promptly soccer kicks him in the head, which, ironically kind of came back to haunt Roger Huerta in his last fight, but still very badass.
Yes, what comes around goes around, I guess, even though, that soccer kick to the head was well-deserved. But yeah, I'm a fan of Roger Huerta's. Unfortunately, he's on a little bit of a slide in his career, working his way back up, just signed a deal with the upcoming World Series of MMA, World Series fighting. Makes its debut on Versus TV, which is now owned by NBC. That's coming up in a couple months. New MMA promotion, so he's getting some more fights and exposure. But Roger Huerta, first MMA fighter to grace the cover of Sports Illustrated, had some awesome fights and fight of the nights for sure during his UFC run. But proven that he's not only a badass fighter inside the cage, but also out stepping up for women around America.
Yeah, and for honestly, he was David in David versus Goliath, and David won pretty easily, actually.
Yeah. So, well done, Roger Huerta at number 2. Moving on to number 1, and this is a.
I think that was number 3.
Oh yeah, you're right. We're at number 2 now. Almost got ahead of myself. Number 2 on our list is former light heavyweight, correct? Was he light heavyweight?
Yeah, and middleweight.
And middleweight. Croatian, guy I thought had a lot of potential in the UFC, just never got things to click.
Protege of Krokop.
Goran Relic. And this is just an awesome story. Goran Relic, when he was in the UFC, had some good fights, but I believe he lost, and I believe he had a pretty serious back injury, I think, that put him out. And, really took some time off from the cage to, consider his career and to work on making a comeback. And I believe this is when this incident happened. But during his layoff time, this is in Croatia, Goran Relic is asleep in his house, living by the ocean, and he hears a car accident. And a car apparently spun out of control, drove off a cliff or off the road, and drove into the ocean. And Relic heard this whole thing, and apparently, in his underwear, got out of bed, ran out to the ocean, jumped into the water, where he proceeded to smash open the car window and pull both these guys to safety and prevent them from drowning. Apparently, saved these guys' lives. That's just a heroic story, and we've covered these robberies and whatnot, and luckily, for the most part, the robberies didn't take a turn for the worse. You never know if they're carrying knives or guns or whatever, like Hardonk mentioned during his incident. But Goran Relic, definitely a lifesaver.
Oh, totally. He kind of exemplifies what you would like to look for in characters for a person, and it's like that, and everybody's, when their adrenaline's kicked in, there's the fight or flight instincts, and, obviously, I don't think we need to really say which one of those he chose, but yeah, Relic, although he didn't really live up to his potential in the octagon, he could potentially, he's young enough to where he could go back to the drawing board and make another run at it. But at least we know that he's a great guy outside the cage.
Oh yeah, and like I said, I thought the guy had a lot of potential. Just never got things to click. He's one of those guys where he's got the vicious leg kicks, and like you said, or just kicks in general. Like you said, a protege of Crow Cop coming out of Croatia, and just going to put things together. But, like you said, he's young enough to turn things around. I don't know what he's doing right now, if he's retired or if he's still working towards fighting. But, you never know. It'd be nice to see the guy back in the cage. For the most part, from what I remember, the fights he put on were all pretty entertaining. And, but yeah, Goran Relic, proving why he's a badass outside the cage, saving lives. So that was pretty awesome story.
He may not be in the MMA history books, at least not yet, as much more than a footnote, but in his for his actions outside of the cage, he will be honored by us in this little list.
Yes. So thank you, Goran Relic, for your life-saving ways. But yeah, I'm just pulled up his
3-fight win streak since the UFC.
Yeah, and his last fight being August 11th, 2012. So 2 of those fights came by way of TKO in the first round. So he's looking pretty good. He lost 3 fights in the UFC to
CB
Dalloway, Kendall Grove, and Krzysztof Sosinski.
It's kind of the fight to Dalloway, it's first time ever at middleweight, and Dalloway is not a great middleweight, but he can give people trouble and capitalize on, certain mistakes. And that was actually, if you look at the time between fights, literally it's like almost a year's time where he was on the shelf from when he came in and kind of beat the crap out of Wilson Govea to when he fought CB Dalloway. So he was combating a lot of ring rust and a weight cut. So that's kind of rough right there. Plus, CB Dalloway is definitely good enough to play spoiler. You look at his fight with Miller, where Miller clearly had him rocked several times, but Miller had his knee injury, so he couldn't really plant his feet and put as much power into there, really get out from under Dalloway. So Dalloway's a smart fighter. He'll capitalize on openings he can. I haven't seen the Kendall Grove fight, but I've heard that a lot of people say that the decision was somewhat bad and that really it should have won.
It was a split decision, so.
Yeah, and then again, the loss to Krzysztof Sosinski, another guy who's actually at least temporarily retired right now, is no slouch at all. He's been in there with some of the best guys. He used to fight at heavyweight, and also it was Relich's return to the light heavyweight division, a division he hadn't fought at that time in, just about 3 years. Yeah.
So, like I said, he's on a 3-fight win streak, and I'm a fan of this guy. I like what I saw when he was in the UFC, and looks like he's putting things together again. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him back in the octagon sometime.
So you took a heavyweight bout too. Which is
impressive.
At any rate, though, moving on, Relic, perhaps we'll see you again.
Definitely. So now we're at number 1.
Finally.
And this is a personal favorite of mine because I like to consider this guy my favorite fighter.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I think he's one of those guys where you look at him, and it's he is oddly kind of like, most fighters kind of regard Renzo this way, Randy Couture this way too. He's one of those guys where just everybody likes him. St. Pierre as well. He's just so nice. Obviously there's some accomplishments that go with that too, outside of the cage, which we will mention. But this guy is just an all-around good guy. He's always kind of been on the right side of everything. Has never once stuck his foot in his mouth like his opponent at his next fight, Michael Bisping. Yes, we are talking about the one, the only, Brian Stann.
Yes, Brian Stann, a true war hero, and a personal favorite of mine in terms of fighters. I'd say overall, guy's my favorite. He's nothing but a professional, and I read his book and I highly recommend it to whether you're an MMA fan or not. Brian Stann's book, Heart for the Fight, is, from cover to cover, is an awesome read. And he ranks number 1. I mentioned he's a war hero. And more importantly, he received a Silver Star while doing duty. And what earned him the Silver Star was what they called or the operation he was on was called Operation Matador. And so he had his platoon that he was leading, his group, and this was during the Iraq War. So he's taking these guys in, and apparently they were doing the same route, back and forth, back and forth. And he mentioned, that's dangerous because eventually they'll catch on what you're doing. Well, sure enough, the enemy attack swarmed them, and they were held down for 6 days. He said RPG fire, straight up, front lines, gun war. And Brian Stann was able to lead his troop. They were able to they managed to call in an airstrike, came in, and all 42 guys in his group survived. So Brian Stann's the real deal when it comes to being a hero. He was there, Iraq War, saving lives and leading our troops and bringing them back safely. And so, props to him. I know he did 3 years, I believe, with the Marines. And, a lot of people give this guy, heat for bringing up his Marines after, post-fight, saying, I want to give a shout-out to my brothers, my fellow Marines.
That's no different than people thanking their family members back home.
Yeah, the guy isn't using it by any way to promote himself. This guy has been there, and he's seen things that a lot of guys haven't seen, and he just taken the moment to really, he fights for them. He's their inspiration. He's his inspiration and, motivation to fight. And, the guy gives him a quick shout out. Big whoop. I'm really tired of reading people saying, oh, Brian Stann, he's annoying. He always says, oh, Marines this, Marines that, just to kind of get people to try and like him. It's overused. For one, he hasn't done it in a while.
He hasn't done it in a while. And the UFC is the one who kind of uses that to really market him. Just like everybody kind of was like giving Kane shit for having the brown pride, but it's not brown power. You change that one word, it means a lot of difference. Brown pride is just having Hispanic pride where you come from, but it's not like Kane's out there promoting that either. UFC used, his Hispanic heritage as basically trying to get him to identify with the Hispanic demographic, and I don't see anything wrong with that. But you don't see Kane giving a shout out to Hispanics after every fight or any fight, I guess. So I agree. Same thing. If anybody, I think Tim Kennedy is a little more annoying about it. Tim Kennedy did something really honorable too by in his last fight, which you could talk in a separate conversation about that, where he got the Ranger Up sponsorship into the ring after they had been banned by having a vet who had been badly burned and disfigured in the ring. But yeah, Tim Kennedy's the one who kind of uses it a little bit more, and it kind of comes across as self-promotion rather than Brian Stann, who's just kind of, reconnecting. Also the guy's the president of the Hire Heroes Act, and one thing that a lot of people, not to get political, but these are just factoids, a lot of people in politics have always talked about, how to take care or how maybe they're not getting as good enough care, the veterans. And that's something that I know President Obama has kind of focused on and tried to make some strides towards. So that's something that, Brian Stann's getting actively involved in. He's not just saying it and using that to get people to like him. He's still basically involved, with the Marines or just all branches of the military service. Oh yeah, for sure. Brian Stann and the UFC is a huge supporter of that. One of my shirts I got was during one of their, this was several years ago, their live fight nights that they were for that was on Spike. That was rallying people to donate money for the brand new Wounded Warrior Project. And it was actually interesting because I bought this shirt and donated my $25 to a good cause and received a cool shirt in return, and got cool good fight show on TV and all for a good cause. And I kind of didn't follow it much after that. I just assumed that they were going to raise enough money. But just a couple years ago, or a couple months ago, I ran into a guy that I sparked a conversation up with, and he mentioned that he was a veteran back from Iraq, and we started talking a little bit, and he talked about how he was going to pursue law and this and that, but that he really wanted to get into defending wounded soldiers.
And I just was like, oh, I'm kind of familiar with that. You know, I heard they're building a facility, and he told me that, you know, that they had just opened it just the other year, and that thing was up and running, and, you know, it's helping a lot of soldiers, and UFC was a huge part for helping raise some money for a good cause. So that was cool. And but yeah, you know, Brian Stan, class act, and I really don't see how anyone can say anything bad about him. And you mentioned he fights Michael Bisping at UFC 152, and I hope he kicks Bisping's ass.
I think we know who you're gonna predict on in that fight.
We'll see. It's gonna be a good fight. You know, I don't know. It could go either way, but yeah. So,
could you, just to segue for a sec, could you think of anyone, maybe you can, worse than Bisping in the middleweight division who you would hate more than Bisping to see Stan lose to, or is that the one where if he loses to that one, that would just piss you off the most?
You know, I originally told myself when Bisping came out of The Ultimate Fighter, I watched that entire season. I like what Bisping brought, and I was like, you know what, I like this guy. I mean, I could see this guy becoming, you know, my favorite fighter. And just the way he acted, especially after his fight with Hamill, and I was just like, man, I do not like this guy. He's kind of been, recently, with some of the things he said, his choice of words kind of growing on me again a little bit, you know. Don't hate him as much, but my thing is, seeing Bisping in the cage with Anderson Silva, I have a hard time seeing that fight happen. So
I have an easy time seeing it happen. I have a hard time seeing why Bisping would want that fight.
That too.
I mean, yeah, he's one of those guys where I don't think he's, again, a bad guy, but he's annoying, and he does stick his foot in his mouth quite a bit. So it would be kind of, you know, I think most people, it's safe to say, at least in America, are going to be going for Brian Stan. And I think even, I mean, you know, in Britain, it's like, it's different because they have a little bit less representation, although there are a lot of good fighters. I think that's also why a lot of people, especially in the UK, have chosen to pick Dan Hardy as their favorite UK fighter instead.
Yeah. But that
guy, by the way.
Yeah. That sums up our list of top 5 badass MMA fighter moments outside the cage. I almost forgot, we do have an honorable mention that didn't make the list. This is not necessarily involving any kind of heroics. Well, it depends on who you know, for some it was a heroic act. But
for Jenna Jameson.
For Jenna Jameson. For Chuck Liddell. But we're talking about the infamous Lee Murray. Now, if you don't know who Lee Murray is, I believe he only had one fight in the UFC, official fight.
Yeah,
one
highly touted prospect, only one UFC fight, a triangle armbar submission win over George Rivera, who is, again, a gamer, so that was an impressive win. A lot of high hopes riding on this guy. One of his only 2 losses was to Anderson Silva, and he took him all the way to decision. Really kind of a tough guy, too. You know, you see some fighters like John Jones, and you think, you know, this is a tough, or like a sports fighter or a businessman, and then you look at a certain guy like Lee Murray, and you're like, all right, not only is this guy tough in the cage, but he's really tough outside the cage. I'd pick him in a street fight.
Oh yeah, well, there was something odd about Lee Murray. He wasn't always, you know, I don't know how you describe Lee Murray. I mean,
it's a little off.
I guess his entrance into the UFC cage kind of characterizes a lot of his personality.
Should have tipped you off.
Yeah, so in his Octagon debut, his one and only fight, he infamously made his way down to the cage. It was a jumpsuit and a Hannibal Lecter mask.
I think it was a prison-style suit with a straitjacket and a Hannibal Lecter mask.
Yeah. I don't think we've seen anything like that since.
Has to be the best UFC entrance of all time.
That or Sokaju's debut with the giant Predator mask. That was pretty badass, too.
Or you do have Jason Miller with the Slipknot mask throwing money into the crowd as he walks in.
Mayhem Miller's always has a classic entrance. But anyways, Lee Murray. So what we're getting at is, dude's crazy. Do you know where Lee Murray's at right now? Where is he at?
Moroccan jail, actually.
Oh, yeah.
I heard last. Although I know he got transferred. I'm not sure if it was to a different part of Morocco or someplace else.
And that's because I believe he, if I'm stand corrected, he is part of the largest bank robbery in the UK that's ever been recorded. The amounts of money that was stolen. He apparently was a part of a gang, and I has led several gangs in his career, I might add. But he was wrapped up in that whole thing, and he's working his way towards a successful MMA career. But out of the blue, he gets busted for a bank heist and thrown into prison, where I believe he escaped. Or
on the run.
Yeah, he attempted to escape or he escaped, either or. But he's back in prison, and he's in there for a while. And but there's a great E60 bit ESPN did on Lee Murray. If you YouTube search Lee Murray E60, I'll find it and I'll like it on my page, so it'll be easier to find. You can check it out on Twitter or whatnot. Self promotion, but yeah, Lee Murray. We got to get to the story. Anyway, so yeah, you can watch E60, get the whole history. There's apparently a movie that's in the works.
One of the only fighters to have a movie based on him, not named. Like, I'm getting them all: Matt Hamill, Anderson Silva, Matt the Law Lindland, and I believe there's a Jens Pulver movie coming out.
Jens Pulver movie's out, and it's actually on Netflix. I watched it, and it's quite good, so you should check it out. It's called Drive, and it's on Netflix Instant Queue, and it's a movie about. At the time, it was possibly his last fight leading up to his fight with Uriah Faber back in the WEC. So it's kind of a build-up in that. It was a really good fight. As we know, he didn't retire after, but it was definitely on his mind. But anyways, Lee Murray and his good-hearted act. This is all kind of rumor-based, but has been confirmed by several different sources that this actually did happen. And so a few MMA guys, fighters, UFC fighters were out at a bar post-show or just doing, I don't know what brought them all together, but they're all at the bar. It just so happens, I believe, Chuck Liddell's there, Tito Ortiz is there, to name a few. And Pat Miletich, who's confirmed this.
The famous recount of the story is the one that spread across the internet via Matt Hughes.
Yeah. So Pat Miletich was there. They're all out at a bar, and this is during the time of Tito Ortiz being light heavyweight champion in the UFC. I don't know if Chuck was there or not. Now that I think about it, he was. Okay, so Chuck was there, and but Tito's running through people in the UFC, defeating people left and right impressively with his ground and pound.
Oh yeah, he was the kingpin of their marquee division.
Oh yeah, so they're partying at this bar, and things kind of escalate between Lee Murray and Tito Ortiz, and maybe Chuck. I think Chuck was kind of in the midst of the whole ordeal also.
Well, there wound up being a huge involvement, but it initially started as a confrontation between Tito Ortiz and Lee Murray.
So the things boiled, and they took it outside, of course, where Lee Murray proceeded to, and according to Pat Miletich and other sources, knock out UFC light heavyweight champion Tito Ortiz on the streets. And the two went at it, and with a combination, and Lee Murray dropped and took Tito out.
I don't think they went at it. I think that went at it was arguing, and then after that there was maybe some shoving, and then it was just Lee Murray hitting. There was two hits: Lee Murray hitting Tito and Tito hitting the ground.
Yeah. So Lee Murray, to the satisfaction of quite a few people, Tito Ortiz, actually the story didn't get out right away. Kind of, as you said, Pat Miletich and
sad.
Yeah, but it gradually came out, and definitely satisfied a few MMA fans. Chuck Liddell, I'm sure, was happy when it happened.
Oh yeah, I think Carlos Newton was there too.
Carlos Newton.
According to Pat Miletich, after that, a big brawl broke out with some fighters and non-fighters, and Chuck Liddell was dropping people indiscriminately.
Yeah, it's quite. If you just search Pat Miletich, Lee Murray, I'm sure you can get some sort of article that recaps the whole incident. But kind of a funny thought of a bar brawl with MMA fighters. But yeah, Lee Murray dropping Tito Ortiz. We're saying this is an honorable mention just because for me personally, not a huge Tito Ortiz fan. I just kind of find that satisfying to hear. But
it is, especially at that time too, when he had more of a reason to be able to talk crap.
Yeah, and I should have looked this up before, but I'm not too sure. But Lee Murray was in the MMA news, I think last year or 2 years ago or something, because he was able to somehow, from prison, call somebody out. I don't know if I think he dropped Tito's name again. For some reason, I feel like Tito was mentioned, but Lee Murray, from prison, somehow got words out, calling someone out. So that was pretty badass, He might be gone, but, you want to make sure people haven't forgot about him.
Still making MMA news. He's about 40 now, I want to say, almost. Something like that.
Damn.
Maybe mid-30s. He's old. He's pretty old fighting age, but he's, they could bring him back for one more fight, although I don't think it would be in UFC.
Yeah, maybe they'll bring him out so he can be at the premiere of his movie or something.
There's a great recap article I saw about looking back at all the UFCs once they're going to do UFC 100, and that one I believe was UFC 38, and it was called Brawl at the Hall, and so the article title was Brawls in, and then in parentheses, and out of the Hall.
Fitting. So, honorable mention, Lee Murray knocking out Tito Ortiz, and I hope the rumors are true. I think that'd be an awesome movie. Just recapping, Lee Murray's life, because he did live. We only briefly touched on some of his craziness, but the guy did really live an insane life inside the cage and out.
Oh yeah, that's what we saw him inside the cage. There's only one part of a multifaceted individual who's involved with, organized crime, obviously, but also had a budding MMA career, amongst many other things too. I believe there's some drug use intertwined in that. Two other ones that could have made, they were in contention for honorable mention, but it wasn't one instance, so you couldn't really name it. Would have been Crow Cop Service in the ATJ Luko anti-terrorism unit in Croatia. That's where he got his nickname from, Filjapovic to Crow Cop, Croatian cop. So not really one instance like Brian Stan, but service that should be honored, same as Paul Tiago. But I think we should maybe try to do maybe least impressive displays of using your MMA skills outside of the octagon, because we could definitely pull one from Tim Sylvia's Volunteer Weekend Cop video.
Oh, geez. This is new to me. You want to give me a quick recap?
It's great. It's just literally it's basically like Cops, but with Tim Sylvia.
I got to see this.
Yeah,
I guess you could also throw in, just because he's been present in the MMA world as of the last couple years, but action movie star and Anderson Silva, corner man, also cornering Machida. Steven Seagal, and his own, crime fighting show. I saw a couple episodes, but yeah, you could throw in Steven Seagal.
Yeah, they're all the same. There's some heist, and he has to go into a place and karate chop 40 dudes to save the person or to get the important item, and then he has to hit a detonator on his way out and then bounce. And that is the plot of 40 Steven Seagal movies.
Yes, and now he's, I believe, serving our border patrol, keeping our border safe.
And has made himself something of a fixture in the form of a leech in MMA. Never thought I'd have to hear about Steven Seagal and MMA in the same sentence.
Steven Seagal and his infamous crane kick that he is now popularized in the MMA world.
Speaking of, just for a second, outside of, or you could say godfathers of mixed martial arts, not that I regard Seagal as a godfather, but some people do, I know. The UFC China poster was released with Rich Franklin and Kung Lee, and it actually shows Bruce Lee in the background, with a quote from Dana White about how Bruce Lee is the godfather of mixed martial arts. So I thought it was pretty good to have them honor him on there. It may be the Asia-only poster, but some of it was in English, too, like that quote. So I want to say that might be the one all around. But that was pretty cool, if you ask me.
Yeah, very nice. I haven't seen this poster, so you have to show me, but that's definitely cool. The godfather of martial arts, for sure. But moving along, we got 10 minutes left. We're going to bring up recent talk of whether or not Brock Lesnar deserves to be in the UFC Hall of Fame. And what sparked this was an interview with Paul Heyman. And Paul Heyman, quote, when asked, does Brock Lesnar deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, Paul Heyman said, of course. He also went on to say that, quote, he's the baddest dude on the planet. And he wasn't shy about letting people know about that. So,
except Kane and Alistair.
Yeah. So, Yeah, Brock Lesnar, his official MMA record is 5-3. Definitely some impressive wins, and including a victory over Hall of Famer Randy Couture. But does 5 wins, 3 losses, and millions and millions and millions of dollars made through UFC pay-per-views warrant you getting into the Hall of Fame?
I think yes, because I think when you look at Hall of Fame, you pick notables, and I'm not a big fan of Brock Lesnar's personality, but you have to respect his accomplishments. I'm a Frank Mir fan, obviously, so that I was on Frank's side in that. But I mean, I'm always able to look objectively at Brock Lesnar and what he has done, what he's able to do. I don't think he's going to be on anywhere near the all-time greats list in anybody's ranking. But I think that you have to include him in the Hall of Fame, especially when you have people like Charles Mask Lewis in there for other accomplishments that they've put towards MMA. Not just in the cage. I mean, they don't have a separate celebrity wing anyways, but I think Brock Lesnar you'd have to put in the regular just MMA one because, he basically kind of came off the street and won the UFC title. He beat, Keith Haring, who at the time was in UFC's top 10. He was a top 15 guy for sure. And he beat Frank Mir pretty badly. He beat Randy Couture and Shane Carwin, who are all 3 top 10 guys. He basically faced the top competition from beginning to end, and he, on his own, single-handedly shattered every pay-per-view record. And in addition to that, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's the UFC Hall of Fame. There's no current MMA Hall of Fame. So, it depends on how legitimate you view that Hall of Fame, too. I personally view the UFC Hall of Fame as being pretty legitimate. I think there should be an MMA one, too, because it would be a shame if guys like Fedor or, Sakuraba were never honored in some sort of Hall of Fame. Guys who never really made it into the UFC. But with that being said, I think maybe not in an MMA Hall of Fame have Brock Lesnar, but in the UFC's Hall of Fame, I think you have to include him, and I think it's stupid not to.
You surprised me on that one, Coop. I'm going to be honest. I thought you were going to give me the no way. But, you know me, man. Brock is one of my favorite fighters. I'm coming from a pro wrestling background before.
As am I.
Before UFC, man, I was a huge pro wrestling fan, and I've got to see Lesnar fight live, do his championship fight against Eddie Guerrero. And, I was a Lesnar fan, following him pro wrestling. And, so I was huge on him when he came to the UFC. Now, I'm not all that bothered by his showboating and his cockiness, as some others are. And you got your MMA fans that just absolutely hate anyone at all coming from a pro wrestling background. For whatever reason, they think pro wrestlers have no business being in the sport, even if they're, a Division I collegiate championship wrestler and have all these accomplishments behind them. And, today you can consider, wrestling a form of a martial arts, you could say. I mean,
look at Josh Barnett. That guy's fought UFC and just MMA as a whole. He's definitely one of the legends of the sport, and he's still, he broke his hand his last fight. He's on any really credible top 10 MMA fighters list has Josh Barnett on there, and he's been on there other than through inactivity as a fixture for years. Joe Rogan even says he may be the number 1 guy. We just don't know it yet because he's not in the UFC. And that's one of those things where Josh Barnett, not only did he come from shoot wrestling, he came from catch wrestling, but shoot wrestling, just kind of like a hybrid style of pro wrestling and legitimate wrestling with submissions, and still pro wrestles regularly. While he's competing at that high level, that would be equivalent to, let's just say if you were to take Brock Lesnar and do it, that would be equivalent if he showed up at like WrestleMania and then came back, just was fighting in the octagon on a consistent basis. It's on a lower profile scale, but if you extrapolate it, it's pretty impressive. Oh
yeah, shout out to Ken Shamrock also there.
Of course.
But yeah, like I said, you surprised me taking the Lesnar. Yes, you know how I feel about Lesnar. I'm a big supporter. But for the sake of to counter argue what you said, and I really think the base has to be determined on what exactly this UFC Hall of Fame consist of in terms of what really is needed to be recognized? You mentioned Mask, who did a lot for the sport, but he's got no fights. He's just kind of an alternate figure that's in there, and I think it's well deserved. He deserves to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Solidified and remembered. But
yeah, you can't just be forgotten. I think you have somebody like him. I mean, there's a lot of guys who, when you look at their careers, they're notable for something else. Like, to me, I think Phil Baroni should be honored in some sort of way, in some sort of Hall of Fame, maybe as a celebrity wing. Things like that. Brock, different because he accomplished a lot too in his short career. But there needs to be some sort of basis for inclusion or disinclusion. Like you take a guy like Chris Lytle. Is he going to be in the Hall of Fame? Should he be?
I think he'd be deserving. Never a champion though. Close, but
And then you're going to have to look at having a huge Hall of Fame potentially. So that might be something worth discussing on one of the shows.
Yeah, right now I feel like the Hall of Fame is very prestigious in terms of who they're letting in. And really every guy that's in there right now, I mean, without due respect to Mask, but everyone in there's a true icon right now in the sport. I mean, Mask wasn't really a public figure. Not a whole lot of people knew about him, but I mean, like I said, well deserved for what he did for this sport. But I mean, you look at what each of these guys have done in the sport. I mean, I think pretty much all of them are some form of prior champion.
Oh, easily.
In the sport, and have, double-digit fights on their records, fighting for the company. But then you got Brock, he's 5-3. He really only had one solid year, one or two, in the cage, with, 2 fights with Frank Mir, and
hopefully a third.
Yeah, if he ever comes back, which I really think his beatdowns from, I mean, a lot of people consider, I mean, he got beat down, easily could have lost to Carwin, but he got beat down against Carwin, he got beat down against Velasquez, and then he got beat down by Overeem to send him out of the UFC. And a lot of people kind of, realized, dude, this guy's kind of soft. He doesn't like to get punched. We all knew that. And
he's kind of more the bully type. He's, all offense.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm going to, right now, to counter-argue, I don't think Brock Lesnar should be in the Hall of Fame. Just because, he hasn't done his time. He doesn't have the iconic records and, I mean, he really kind of, I mean, yeah, it's an awesome comeback story he had coming back from diverticulitis, and, I mean, almost killed the guy, but, he's kind of left. I mean, I feel like there's more fights left in Brock, and he's just kind of said, I'm done. I've accomplished, I'm a champion, and, I think he's kind of realized, guys like Overeem are just, on a completely different level than him, and I give him full credit, coming from just a wrestling background, jumping right into the cage, getting fed right to the wolves, and become a champion. I mean, that's awesome. So, I mean, what you really got to look at, and I think what decides this is what is the basis of getting in? Is it what kind of impact you played in this company, and whether you should be someone that should be immortalized inside this Hall of Fame and remembered for your contributions and all around, just he is, if not the biggest name UFC has ever had in terms of, money made and all this. People tuned in to watch this guy fight.
I think if you look on a long-term scale, it might be Chuck Liddell, but I think, if you look at just pay-per-view numbers, it's Brock.
And I mean, the guy doesn't have the credentials, I don't think, to get in terms of fights and, mixed martial arts background, purely just, a wrestler that worked on his striking, submission game a little bit. But, had he started earlier, the guy definitely could be a Hall of Famer. But, I just don't think he's been in the octagon long enough. He's 5-3 with, Shane Carwin win. You can consider that maybe not that impressive. Although the second round, the way he came out and won was,
kind of, that's what makes a champion, though.
Yeah, but, I mean, he took quite a beatdown. And then to follow that up with a beatdown from Velasquez and Overeem kind of, I think, puts a little cloud over his because I mean his debut against Frank Mir was, even though he lost, it was impressive because no one really knew what to expect from Lesnar, and quite frankly, I think he had the ref not called him for that back of the head shot, could easily have TKO'd Mir right there on his debut and just really stunned and shocked everyone. But he was on the
made a mistake.
Yeah,
and
he proved
he made two mistakes actually, the back of the head, and then he made the leaving his. Not only worrying about his arms, not his legs, but I mean, and I don't really agree with the point deduction, but you live and you learn, and obviously Diggs, he beat Frank the second time. Yeah,
but I mean, he's got a win over Heath Herring, impressive, but Heath Herring's been gone since that fight. He hasn't been back, and he beat an aging Couture, who I believe after that fight, took a fight with Machida, if I'm not correct.
No, he actually went on a 3-fight winning streak at light heavyweight. He fought Brandon Vera. He fought Mark Coleman, and then he fought James Toney. And then he took the fight with Machida.
That's right. Okay, so Couture. So, I mean, I guess Couture still had a little gas in his tank, but still, 40-year-old champion. And, so, I mean, he has a win over, an aging Couture who's on his way out of the UFC. So, I mean, just looking at his wins and looking at his losses, I mean, I just feel like, especially how he's ended his career, he's got a cloud over his accomplishments, and that's, coming into the UFC on fast terms and winning the championship. But I'm going to have to say, just based off everyone else's wins and what they've done for the company, Brock doesn't deserve to stand next to, your Royce Gracie's, your Chuck Liddell, Dan Severn, Matt Hughes. I mean,
it's the way you view it, the Hall of Fame. It sounds like you kind of look at it like a jiu-jitsu instructor would look at a young upstart. Even if the guy comes in and taps all of your black belts right away, you got to put in the time too. So I understand that philosophy. So based on that term for comparison, I would agree with you. I kind of view the Hall of Fame as a combination of things. It's like how ESPN just released the best teams and sports franchises across all 4 sports, and a lot of it is winning percentages and title potential, but it's also things like how well they're fan friendly, bang for your buck, stuff about the venue, how they're run. So I think it's a little more than just how long you've been in the sport and done during that time.
Quick shout out to the Toronto Maple Leafs on that list. I believe they came up as the worst team in sports, hockey. So
shout out to the Spurs, number 3, only team on the list every year since.
Look at you, Mr. Spurs fan. Congratulations. You know who was number 1? I didn't look at it.
Yeah, it was OKC.
OKC. Wow.
But with that being said, I think that I'll just read this. I think Fight Linker, another great MMA site we highly recommend. They're a little bit more on the humor side of it too. They made 2 great points about Brock and whether or not he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. First of all, they look at the Hall of Fame and it says, they bring up the points that I had touched on about Fedor and whatnot, but they'll say, Frank Shamrock will. They basically say it's not the real Hall of Fame. They say Frank Shamrock will never be admitted because Dana White is offended by his very existence, even though he was the UFC's first dominant champion of the post-tournament era. As long as the UFC Hall of Fame remains a private club whose members are chosen by the UFC, the concept of deserving isn't really applicable, meaning that you don't really deserve to be in it or not. It's whether or not the brass likes you. The brass likes Brock Lesnar. As of now, I think that Brock Lesnar, if we had to make predictions on not whether you believe it, but whether he is going to be or not, I would bet the house that Brock is going to be in it. That last bit was my own opinion, but to quote Fight Linker again, they were making the case for Brock based on his in the cage wins and whatnot. Talking about how he shattered pay-per-view records, and then their last closing bit. And this is probably why you're expecting my finding humor in this is probably why you're expecting me to say no Brock Lesnar in the Hall of Fame. Anyways, I'll just quote them. And he showed us that a big guy can have psychosexual anxiety too by tattooing a huge unyielding phallus on his chest, pointing directly at his chin. I'm sure there's some sort of Freudian explanation for that, but I'm not sure. I want to know what it is.
Touche. And on that note, we are just over an hour. Surprisingly, we thought it was going to be a short episode, but I think we covered some good topics and had good discussions. So next week, as I mentioned before, we got our UFC 152 prediction show, and we'll cover any other headlines that come up. But so stay tuned. Once again, thanks for listening. If you're still listening all the way to the end, props. And feel free to subscribe. Once again, we're going to try and keep these things consistent. We're on Twitter. I just redid the blog, so check it out, fightblock.blogspot.com. Post the videos there, and we got some archive stuff and occasionally write up some articles, but check that out. And
preview for next week.
Preview for next week?
Yeah, it's going to be the prediction show, our first ever. I've done some as articles before. First ever predictions show on the radio show.
Oh yeah. Mention prediction show next week. So yeah, stay tuned. Once again, Matt, thanks for joining me.
Very welcome.
And that ends our show. So
till next time.
Peace.